Okay, so here we are in scope. This is a dictation that I did from TED Talk. I love the TED Talks. They're interesting, and they're usually, well, no, I can't even say that. Sometimes they are super easy, and sometimes, and slow and just really easy to get. And other times they are just talking 90 to nothing, and it is hard. This one was somewhere in between. It was a very interesting video. And what you can see starting here where it says Martine Rothblatt, this is me with, and this is right here, a conflict. Now, this is one of my conflicts. Everybody's conflicts are different. For me, I have problems with, as you can see, our, or, her, or, sir. That means that there have been times in the past where I would get any of those words for one of the other words. And so I created a conflict, and the very first conflict in the list is always a different color. That's the one that Dragon thinks is right. That doesn't mean it's definitely right. That means that's the one we think is right. So it is actually right in this case, and I would just click on it, and you notice that all of the other options disappear. So let's see, this is taken in Nigeria right after having taken the Washington, D.C. bar exam. But this doesn't look like a Martine. Right, that was myself as a male, the way I was brought up before I transitioned to male to female, and Martin to Martine. You were brought up Martin. So this is obviously incorrect because that doesn't make sense. Brought up Martin, brought Rothblatt. So in order to hear it, I generally will go up a sentence or two and right click.
My son said, if you become a woman, will you still be my father? And I said, yes, I'll always be your father. And I'm still his father today. We understand.
Okay, so I obviously didn't have it in the right place.
On this. Bina said that I love your soul. And whether the outside is Martin or Martine, it doesn't matter.
Okay, so here, some of the things I can figure out without audio, but some I can't. As you can see, as I'm reading through it, even without the audio, I can figure out what the right things are just by context. See, this is a good example. Should here is actually showed. So let's say that I want to add that as a conflict. I would open up options up here. I would go to my conflict list, and I would click on add. I would add in the first one, should, hit enter, and then add in the second one, S-H-O-W-E-D, showed, add. And now, for now, that's all that I want to add. So I'm going to click on close here, and then save. And now should and showed is in my list. I can click on apply and OK. It's not going to all of a sudden appear because I've just added it, and they appear when you dictate them. So I'm just going to change it here. Does anybody have a question about how conflicts work?
Yes, ma'am, I have a question.
Please.
If I were in the courtroom, which I never am, but if I were in the courtroom and I were writing in real time and I was using these conflicts, these rules,
Yes.
would somebody following my feed see, our, our, her, sir, that whole list?
Yes, they would.
Okay.
They would.
Thank you.
Conflicts are viewable, and they will go through your feed. The nice thing about it is that instead of it being completely incorrect, the right option is there. And so it does help the reader to understand that it's a conflict and it's one of those words. And most likely it will help them to understand the entire context.
Terrific. And do I recall correctly that we can have different sets of rules for different, like job dictionaries?
For RealTime Rules, you can.
Okay.
These are conflicts, and conflicts are not, we don't have multiple conflict lists right now.
Okay.
But if that's something, if you start using the conflicts list and you think that's something that would be helpful, then please let me know. We'd be happy to put it on the wish list.
Wonderful.
Are there any other questions about conflicts? Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on then to word swaps. Word swaps are probably the easiest option to utilize. Word swaps are mostly for sounds like words. So, for instance, here, 5. Most court reporters don't want to see a number, they want to see the word. So if I hold down the control key and I hit the Y, there you go. There's the right thing. Now, with a word swaps and conflicts are a lot alike, except for word swaps do not show what options are there. They're in the background, and you can see what word swaps you currently have by, again, going to Options and clicking on the second tab. That's your word swap tab. And there are all sorts of things in here. These have been added over a 20-year period by all sorts of different people. There are going to be things in here that you are never going to use. There may be things in here that I may never use, but you would, or things that you would use that I wouldn't. So when time permits, I think it's a great idea to go through the word swap list and see if those things are things that you want to be there. Now, as a general rule, I say use it for a while first, before you delete too many things. That way you can see what comes up for you, because Dragon's different for all of us. And you can remove something, you can delete it, you can edit it. Let's see if I can find one. Here, let's use this one. So I'm going to go to edit, and I really, honestly, I don't think that I would use any of these words. Unless there's, unless they're talking about art, they would be referring to the process of gilding, to gild, which is something we do with like gold. What do we even call that? It's like a very thin layer of gold paper that we can put onto a painting to gild it. It's something that was done a great deal in the very old days of art. Not too many people use it anymore, but in churches and in church paintings, it was used a lot. So I think I'm going to cancel this, and instead of making any changes, I'm going to delete this because I don't think it's useful. Now, I can go through this whole list and do that. Here, this one is always funny to me. I just don't think I'm gonna hear AI as I. So I'm gonna delete that one. I don't think that we have enough people that say I the way Irish people do in Ireland. So I'm going to delete that word too. And I'm going to leave I and I, because those I use. And so I'm going to save and exit. A praise and a prize, R and R. There's some very good ones in here that I use a lot. There are some that I never use at all. I would never use BO, but it may come up in court. There's, when you look through it, you're going to find a lot of things that are iffy and you may never use it. Feel free to delete. What's very important is those that you add. And as you are dictating in SpeechCat, you'll have things that come up and you'll say, oh, that does sound familiar. I generally don't add it until I've seen it a few times. Because if it's going to happen once in a great while, it really doesn't, it's not important enough for me to add to word swap. If it's something that, a word that I think I'm going to say and see a lot, then I would want to add it. A lot of the things that we put in here a long time ago just never happen anymore. You never see it anymore at all. And so you definitely can edit it out. If you don't have any word swaps and you want some, send me an email and I'll send you a list. You can import word swaps. You can export word swaps so you can share them with other people. That may or may not work out for you. I would generally ask other people, what kind of word swaps do you use? What are your most popular word swaps? Word swap is something that can be done on the fly, meaning as you are dictating, if you have the ability to edit on the fly, which not everybody does, and some people it takes time for them to get there, to do editing on the fly, but you can actually use word swap while you are dictating. And that's pretty handy because it's a pretty easy, Control Y just to swap it out. So that is word swaps. It can be used in real time and in scope. And I find myself loving this feature so much that I often will do Control Y in Word, just not remembering that that is not a feature of Word. So it's it's a feature I'm very fond of. Any questions about word swap? It's pretty easy. Okay, the next thing that is very useful and something that you can use in real time as well, once you get used to doing editing on the fly, is brief forms. So let's say that you have a break right here. So you want to go off the record. So I'm going to type in OTR and hit space. And that's what I have for my brief form for going off the record. One of my very favorite things to make brief forms for are my Q's, my A's, and my speakers, so that when I'm doing correction, it goes a lot faster. If you go back to options, the very first tab is the brief forms tab. And as you can see right here, I have ACO and AMAC. I think the other day I added Keek and CAC. See, here are all my speakers. So if I'm doing correction and I said SPE1 and it did not come out, all I would have to do is type in SP1 and it would write asterisk speaker 1 asterisk. The reason I do this is because I feel that shift 8 cap SPEAKER number shift 8 for asterisk is just a whole lot more typing than I want to do to add my markers in, because the markers have to look exactly like you see them here in the long form. So that's why I make briefs for them. I also make briefs for my untrans to add them in if I miss them. If I, if Dragon doesn't write them correctly. A lot of people put in their exhibits so that this is plaintiff's exhibit number 1, and then each one is, number 2, number 3, number 4 through 9. You can create as many of these as you like. You can also create voice briefs for that so that you don't have to type it in. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can add Keek. So if I was the kind of person that said Keek for my cue, I would want to add that. And let's say I said CAC for my A. I would want to add that. And you can add as many for the same thing as you like. And so that's what I've done for all of my cues, my A's, my speakers, and a few of my untrans. Some people do their cross-examination by. For me, that is CEB. I guess it's not in alphabetical order because I do not see my CEB. It seems to be occasionally in alphabetical order. So I'm going to add that. Let's say that I wanted to just type in CEB, but I wanted to write in all caps cross-examination by, and then I'll hit enter. That adds it. Let's say that I want to do DEB. I make these all in lowercase so that I don't have to use the shift key. Now DEB is Deb, so I can't use that. So I'm gonna do DIR for direct EB. And I wanted to write in all caps, direct examination by add. As you can see, these are pretty easy to add. The thing that I think is true with brief forms, and I could be wrong about this, but it's just my opinion, is that we tend to remember the ones that we create ourselves. So it's not easy to remember the briefs that other people create unless it makes sense to you. So as you look at the short forms and the long forms, you can see that, I write documentation. So I have DC for double click and DCON for double click on, because in writing documentation, those are things that I have to write a lot. So I have some here that are really more for what I do than what you do, like Digitran and Digitran main menu and things like that. DUQ for don't understand the question. DXO for defendant's exhibit without a number. Oh no, that's 10, I think. Yeah. If the word is cut off or the phrase is cut off, if you point to it, it'll tell you what it is. You can also edit these. For instance, okay, I'm going to edit it. And maybe what I want is for it to be a little O instead of a big O. And maybe I don't want the period there because maybe they'll say, okay, well, what do you think? You know, maybe it's not the end of a sentence. So I'll just click on okay there. And as you see, it changed right after it got back on this window. So this is something that you can use in real time, but it is, I would say, used mostly in the scope phase when you are editing the document. Any questions about brief forms?
Question, ma'am.
Yes.
Is this something that I can dictate, or is this just a typing thing?
This is a typing thing.
Okay.
But we'll talk next about voice briefs, which I think is you know, when I'm dictating, I don't have that ability that court reporters have to edit on the fly. I think that's a great gift. It is not an easy one, if you ask me. So I can't really do it, but I can do voice things. You know, I am getting to where I'm second nature about my cart practice and doing all my environmental sounds like applause and laughter and clicking and all the things that come up when you're doing cart. So if no one has any more questions about brief forms, I will move to voice briefs, if that's okay with everyone. Okay, because I did not load the speech engine, I'm going to have to leave here. Notice that I did not hit save because SpeechCat saves every 90 seconds for me. And so I don't have to worry so much about hitting the save button. For this next portion of the class, I'm going to go into Scratchpad because Scratchpad is where you can go in SpeechCat to work on Dragon without creating a job. And lots of us like that. It's loading on the opposite screen. I apologize. Hang on just a minute. It still tells you to wait until the engine opens at the bottom. And when it says topic ready, then you can feel free to go into your vocabulary editor, which is this little blue person with a bubble and a pencil. That's your Dragon vocabulary editor. And normally the first thing I do when I get into the vocabulary editor is I click next to display and I go to custom words only. And I do that because it allows me to see what's already in there. Because sometimes I have them already and I go to add something, it's already there. So I generally try to look for it now before I add it. Okay, so here we are. I am going to add off the record. Oh, thank you, Becky. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and add the off the record because I think that's pretty common. And so I'm going to click on add. And over here on the left, I'm going to add the word or the phrase the way I want it to appear. So let's say that I want it to appear as off the record, period. Just like that. And then on the right-hand side, I want to add what I'm going to say in order to bring that phrase up. My first response is OTR. Now, I tend to write that like this. I could also write OTR, but I'm guessing that I'll have a better response with this because it's words. And Dragon somehow just gets that better. So I'm going to click on add and notice that it says there's a check in the box that says I want to train the pronunciation of this word or phrase. So I'm going to click on add and I'm going to train it. Now, notice that I say I trained it several times. And the reason that I do that is because I'm giving it 3 approximations of what I sound like when I say those words or that word. And so it's very simple. That's what we call a voice brief. So let's say that I wanted another one. One of my old favorites is to within a reasonable degree of medical certainty. Oh, certain, A-I-N-T-Y. I'm never going to be able to say that 5 times quickly, so I'm going to call that med cert. I'm going to click on add. And then I'm going to save it. And that's how we add what we call a voice brief. So I'm going to close and I'm going to go back to Scratchpad and share that screen again. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and try my MedCert and my OTR. Mhm. That's it. Mhm. Of course, if I'd have trained it as OTR, then it wouldn't have come out. So now I'm going to return to my vocabulary editor and my custom words only. And I'm going to delete this one. And I'm going to try something different. I used to use off-rec, so that's what I'm going to try. Okay, so anytime I add something and I train it and I test it at least 3 times to make sure that it's working consistently. Now, are there any questions about voice briefs? There are some things that I need to tell you about them. When you're doing a voice brief, there's no adding a tab or 2 tabs or an indent before it. It comes in with a new line only. Actually, it doesn't even have a new line. Now, we can make it have a new line. Let's do that because most people want their parentheticals on a new line. So we're going to return to the vocabulary editor and show custom words only. And I'm going to select my off the record and I'm going to click on properties. Now, are you all seeing the properties screen? The word properties?
No.
No. Okay, great. I will share that one then. Okay, are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to insert, I want to precede it with a new line, and I want to follow it probably, I guess, with a new line. Well, no, because you would say after it, you would be coming back on the record. So that would be a new parenthetical, correct? And that one would have a new line as well. So you don't want to follow it with a new line because then you'll have double new lines. You don't want to bother with how the next word is formatted because the next word is going to be a whole new dictated line. There are no numbers. You don't want to follow it or precede it with numbers. So there you go now. It looks like you can only precede it with a 0, 1, or 2 spaces before. So, and there's really no need to have more than a space after it. So we have set the formatting for this word phrase. So we're going to click on OK. And the next time we use it, can you enter code for time to that brief?
Such as off the record at 10 a.m.
Ah, well, I would use, I would probably make that a voice stroke because then I could use a time in it. Michelle, do you know of a way to add the current time into a voice brief?
Did you hear me?
No, that's the first thing I hear is, did you hear me?
No, I do not know how.
Okay. I'm pretty sure we can figure that out in a voice stroke with some of the codes we have in SpeechCat, but not in Dragon. So when we address voice strokes, Becky, I will make a note to discuss that. We're not going to talk about voice strokes tonight because it's very involved. So it'll be another night, but
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Thank you.
You're welcome. We'll get to that. So the other thing that I want to talk to you about, I guess I should ask you first, does anyone have any other questions about creating the voice briefs in Dragon? Nope. Okay. What I'd like to do then is I'd like to introduce you to RealTime Rules. So I'm going to close here, and the thing that I do want to do is save my speech files. So if you do not save your speech files after you add voice briefs or anything, after you add or edit anything in your Dragon vocabulary editor, you definitely want to save your speech files. Otherwise, it will not be there when you return to it to use it. So try to remember that. I'd like to show you RealTime Rules. So I'm going to click on Edit and RealTime Rules. And let me make sure that that is being shared. Okay. So here are my RealTime Rules. I have many of them. I have several RealTime Rules folders, and I call them something that means something to me. So the numerics folder is probably the one that I've done that is probably in the beginning was the most helpful to some of our captioners, because they want to see time in a very specific way. And what you're seeing on the left is what Dragon normally writes when you say 1 a.m. This is what the captioners want to see for 1 a.m. and so on and so forth. Left side is what Dragon writes. The right side is what the writer wants to happen. These also include a bunch of interstates. It includes these here specifically are for weather, highs in the 90s, highs in the 80s, highs in the 20s, mid 50s, mid 40s, mid 30s, so on and so forth. And then you go see like local news at 6, or the local 6, or things like that. You can really see here what comes up when someone does the weather, because all of these were created from multiple folders that a captioner had that had numbers in every folder. And so what was happening was the writer was creating a number in, say, her weather folder for the high 50s and low 30s and whatever. And then she was going and creating another entry in another RealTime Rules folder. And so they were conflicting, and the RealTime Rules were not working in either folder because they were duplicated in different folders, and so they were struggling against each other. So you have to be careful with that. You want to make sure that if you're going to have multiple folders, that you make sure that you don't have conflicts inside those folders. Okay, so you'll see here to the right of the folder name, and all you have to do to add a folder is click down here, add a folder. I'll just create another folder. You can see how easy it is to add a folder. Main is what's going to be in your, that's your default folder basically. When you are ready to add a word or phrase, you can click on add phrase or word, and you can make your addition. So let's say that you wanted, let's see, what did I see? Let's say if OTR comes up, I want it replaced with off the record. I can add that rule, and from now on, if OTR comes up, it will be replaced with off the record. That rule has been added. I can just go on to creating another rule, or I can just click cancel from here. That'll take me back to my folders. And I would like for you to notice that the real-time rules, beneath the real-time rules, if you can see behind them to the scratch pad, you'll see that right at the bottom in the status bar of the scratch pad, you'll see the names of the folders that are checked. Those are the folders that I'm using right now. If I don't want to use one of those folders, I'll deselect it right here. You can add a phrase, you can add or edit a word, or you can just add this way so that if you're not sure if it belongs in phrases or words, you can just add it this way, the way I just did, and it'll automatically put it, SpeechCat will put it in the right folder for you. You can delete a folder over here. You can also share your folders. We have not yet created an export and import for real-time rules, but that is on the list and should be done by convention. But for right now, we go and copy them in the program data folder for AudioScribe under rules, and then we can paste them in somebody else's in the same way. Once you're done, all you have to do is close the real-time rules, and they are immediately available to you. And what real-time rules do is they automatically will do their thing without you having to do anything else. Real-time rules are always on as long as there's a folder checked. And down here is where I was referring to what folders you currently have checked, right here. Any questions there with real-time rules?
I do have a question, Adria. So
Please.
is this where if I'm doing a math class and I want cosine to always be C-O-S-I-N-E, not C-O-S-I-G-N, this is where I would address that with a real-time rule?
That is exactly right.
Perfect. That would be a wonderful thing to have. Thank you.
That is exactly right. And there you can definitely create your real-time rules. You can create a rules folder for each class you do if you want.
Perfect.
You know, and it'll only work when that real-time rule is checked. And you can edit them to your heart's content. And you can share them to your heart's content, which is also really important. One of the things that stenographers have had for some 20 years is the ability and the desire to share resources, which is what has made them all grow to such success in their profession. And so I love seeing on the Friends of NVRA page where someone comes up and says, anybody have a voice code for off the record? And everybody will jump on and say, I use OTR, I use off-rec, I use. And so it's wonderful because voice writers are starting to help each other like that. I'm sure voice writers have helped each other in many ways in times past. However, with CAT systems now coming into play, we're able to help each other so much more. And I just love that. And I encourage you all to continue doing that because it makes us all better. And I love reading that sort of stuff. Now, there really isn't time left tonight to talk about voice strokes, but I will be discussing it next week. I would love if you would send me things that you think voice strokes would be good for. Anything that requires formatting. So, for example, when you see in court a witness, you will see something like where upon, comma, and then, centered normally, which I don't have center, so I'll just tab over. Okay, having been first duly sworn, did testify as follows. And then you'll see, like, let's say that my format is tab Q period tab. So I would actually create a voice stroke out of this. And I have done it many, many times. And right here, we actually insert a replacement field for the deponent so that all you have to say is your spoken form for all this. My spoken form for all this is wit sworn. Some people use wit mac or wit co. All sorts of things that you can use to add this. And that way, when the swearing goes on, you're the one that has to do it. So, you've got to swear them, then you've got to go ahead and dictate it all. So it'd be really great to be able to say wit sworn or wit swear or monkey butt or whatever to get this in there. And then all you have to do when you get back is repeat the next question. Wit sworn, and then go with the attorney that's talking. And so voice strokes are very, very powerful, especially if you are an official, because officials have to constantly be dictating jury charges and laws that come up in the court. And the judge is normally reading from his bench book at that point, and anybody who reads is going to be reading faster than they would normally be speaking. So that makes it especially hard. So it's really funny that how they get to breathe, truly, I don't know, without using voice strokes, because everybody in the courtroom gets to breathe except the reporter. And so nobody really thinks about how the reporter is dying over there in the corner, because they're having to repeat somebody reading that is going, 280, 300 words a minute reading, and the court reporter is having to dictate all of this. That's not fun. And so for officials, we've created a ton of voice strokes for those different things, and also for parentheticals that come up. And it's really, really convenient. So I'm definitely going to show you how to do voice strokes. There is a video on our YouTube channel, our standard AudioScribe YouTube channel. that you can go and see on Voice Strokes, and I'd love for you all to watch it at some point this week so that when I do it next week with you, it will be easier to understand because there are several parts to creating voice strokes. And if you watch it first, I think you'll understand it better. So I'll send you all the link in the Skype text so that you can go and watch that at some point this week. Any questions about anything? You're a wonderful class. I thank you again for joining me. And you all have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Thank you.